very much, Prof. Mahao. I think maybe to get started, here we are, less than a week to go before the eagerly anticipated elections. What can you tell us about the preparations of the BASOTHO Action Party? Are you good to go, or are there still other outstanding areas that need to be tackled?
We are ready. Mm-hmm. We have done most of what had to be done. Mm-hmm. But as you know, with elections, you continue to work until the last minute. So essentially, what we are left with are what one may consider mopping up operations. But for all intents and purposes, we are ready. We just have one constituency where, unfortunately, we will not be fielding a candidate. We're out in the mountains where the candidate could not deliver his nomination forms within the timeline. But that's the only snack, maybe a snack that we have had. Otherwise, we are ready.
Okay. Which constituency is this?
That's Lebake.
Lebake.
Yeah.
Okay. How would you rate your chances? You've been campaigning throughout the country. How would you rate your chances of an electoral victory?
We think we'll do very well. We think we will do very well. I still believe that we are one of the 4 favorites in this election. Yeah.
I see. No, thank you. Your policy document has focused on mainly 3 key areas, namely rule of law, clean governance, inclusive and equitable socio-economic development. Would you care to elaborate on these issues and peg them for the electorate?
Oh, most certainly. Good governance. It is what this country desperately needs. There are very serious issues of corruption, very serious issues of the public service, which has deteriorated and become very unprofessional. And so any government that seeks to turn things around would have to confront the issue of good governance frontally. With respect to the rule of law, again, the degree to which the country has deteriorated in terms of adhering and observing the law is alarming. General chaos in the manner in which society conducts itself, serious crime rates. As you know, Lesotho stands at a very dubious distinction of being the first and third highest ranking country on the African continent and in the world respectively with respect to homicides. Now, all of these are issues that as a party we did a very deep analysis and said this should be the guiding lines in terms of putting the country on the right trail. Now, with respect to equitable and inclusive economic growth, again, Lesotho ranks number 8 in the world in terms of the very huge gap between the haves on the one side and the have-nots. And it is as a result of a neoliberal trajectory of development that we have pursued since the 90s. And we need to address that to ensure that everybody in the country has a stake in the economy. You need that because social cohesion and national unity cannot only be built around politics, it has to be built around what stakes everyone does have in the economy of the country. All right. I think I'm done with that question.
Okay. Yes, it's one thing to articulate the problems, the challenges that the nation faces, and another to actually take action, implement programs to address these issues. From what we have heard, the issues that you speak to, almost every party that is contesting the elections have been speaking to the same issues. So what maybe we need to understand from you is what would distinguish the BAP from all other parties that have been doing the talking, including those that are currently in government. Last time they were contesting, they were speaking to some of the same issues, promising to tackle them, but here we are 5 years later, they are asking for another 5-year mandate from the electorate and saying that they are going to tackle these issues. Probably from your perspective, what has caused this failure of those who have been in government to address these issues, and what is it that distinguishes the BAP from those who have come before it and those who are articulating, identifying and articulating the same challenges? What distinguishes you? What has caused those who have been there before to fail, and what distinguishes the BAP? How is the BAP going to do things differently this time?
Talking and walking the talk are two different things. You may well be aware that BAP defines itself as a party of action. That is where the word action has a place in our name. So that's a major difference. We are a party that believes in walking the talk. We have done an in-depth analysis on all of those major delivery issues in our policy document, and developed a very doable set of activities. And I think that is where a major difference with what many parties would make as rhetoric, merely to catch the attention of the electorate and ourselves. Ours are very doable, achievable deliverables in terms of all those three critical areas. We don't overpromise, but we size out exactly what it is that needs to be done. We also have the political will to follow through our commitments. We also have done our homework in terms of what caliber of personnel do you need to have in order to follow through with those objectives. One, let's talk about good governance. We are the only party that has required of all of its candidates to have a police clearance that they don't have criminal records before we can endorse them to stand as candidates. Because you can't send to Parliament people that are already compromised to go and look after the public purse and to go and make laws for this general citizenship when they themselves have fallen fault of the law. That's one thing. The other thing is the caliber of our candidates. Remember that the BAP talks about a capable state. And in order to have a capable state, you must have men and women who are going to manage the state machinery, that are competent, that are capable. And that is what we have done as BAP, to ensure that candidates who may go to parliament and may end up in government are very competent and qualified people to man the machinery of state.
I see. So maybe bringing you also in line with this, there have been a lot of thefts, armed robberies, the homicides that you've spoken to. Where do you think the problem lies? Is when we look particularly at the police, we've seen a lot of divisions. We've seen a lot of divisions within the police force. We've also seen the blame game as well. We've even seen the outgoing Prime Minister writing to the police commissioner to say that he wants to retire him. He must show cause why he should not be retired. For you, where exactly does the problem lie? Why has this problem been allowed to, this situation, why has it been allowed to continue to the extent that Lesotho is now where it is, as you describe, an unenviable situation where in Africa is the meta capital, and then in the world it has the third highest rates for homicides. What has caused this? Where does the problem lie?
The problem lies in three domains. The one is the very grave unemployment rate in the country. The second one is the moral decay that has afflicted society in general. The third one, outright government incompetence. Over the years, government has hollowed the institutions of law enforcement, the police, the whole judicial criminal justice system. They have completely been hollowed, one, by unprofessional political appointments, and two, by exponentially depriving the institutions of the resources to be able to do their job. So that is why crime has grown uncontained in the country. Somebody commits a crime, he may be caught up by the police. The police will prepare very poor investigative work. The prosecution will also mess up the process. The courts themselves will do a poor job. And as a result, there is no effective deterrence to committing a crime in this country. Again, also, the laws are very weak. Some of the penalties are completely undeterrent because they are totally antiquated.
Yeah. Some of the parties have spoken about, we know that on the statute books the death penalty is there, but it has not been implemented for 2 decades now, if not 3. Some parties have spoken about actually implementing, executing convicted criminals. What is the BAP's position to this? Do you think we need to go to such extremes to implement capital punishment?
I'll tell you, here is the problem. If you don't catch the criminals, how would death sentence be a deterrent? So you look, it is an emotional response. The problem is catch the criminals, conduct proper investigations, institutionalize professional prosecution, and have sentences passed in time and keep the criminals where they belong. Now, this talk about death sentence, it may well be that given the scale of serious crimes, death sentence has to be implemented. But I'm telling you, there are so few cases of murder that reach finality. At the end of the day, the problem is not with the final sentence. It is with the whole value chain until somebody is made to account in the courts.
Okay, so let's put it another way. Here is the 7th of October, elections are held. A few days later, the BAP is declared the winner, and then eventually you are inaugurated into office. Can you just maybe forward-looking, what would be the first issues that you would immediately implement? In other words, do you have a plan, let's say 100 days like we normally see with other countries, to say within the first 100 days this is what I will do on a social level, on an economic level, and maybe on a transformational level in general for the country? What would your first 100 days look like?
I'll tell you, the first one is to bring back public confidence in government. And so what I would immediately do, fill up the potholes along our major roads. Immediately work on reconstructing bridges that have collapsed all over the country. That would enable the public to be able to conduct its affairs using our major roads freely. The second one, immediately set up a commission to go through all of the the Attorney General, the Auditor General's reports, the Public Accounts report, and go through all of those to find what actions have been taken in respect to claims of financial malfeasance in the country. So the commission will be there. And also investigate other allegations related to corruption which may not feature in those reports. So the commission will be there to attend to that aspect. The other one, the third one, ensure that all senior public servants sign 2 performance contracts so that everyone has performance to deliver on. And then, of course, immediately, because Lesotho is in a financial crisis, immediately on establishing a cabinet, trim it down to a maximum of 18. Also dispose of other fringe benefits of ministers and other higher ups, such as extra vehicles, which they don't need, and work towards ensuring that government ministries operate from government-owned offices. Because right now we spend so much money on paying rent, when you would see all over the show you have government buildings that are not being used, but on the other hand, government. So go ruthlessly on cutting down wastage so that you begin to have a proper fiscal management system in place. Those are the 4 or 5 major immediate deliverables.
Yes. You were part of the recently dissolved 10th Parliament as a Senator. This is a parliament which was seized with the reforms process, the implementation of the multi-sector reforms which have been long been in the making. Again, the parliament disappointed. By the time it was dissolved, the reforms had not been approved, and then there were other attempts to recall the parliament to approve the reforms, and whatever it is that they were able to accomplish in the end was then thrown out by the Constitutional Court and confirmed by the Court of Appeal as such. In your view, what is your view about that process? Would you say there was a sincerity among or within the parliamentarians to implement the reforms, and would you say that it was a genuinely people-driven process, as we have seen, as was supposed to be the case, because there was supposed to be consensus in the nation to build, if I may quote, the Lesotho we want? What's your take? Was this a genuine process? Why did it fail? And was there the necessary will among the parliamentarians? Was there sincerity?
Look, there are 2 issues there. One is utter government incompetence in managing processes. Remember that the first bill reached Parliament around October, December last year, and it was returned, and it went back to Parliament in April. And because government was asleep or just didn't care, there was a lot of playing around at Parliament because there was no supervision. There was no leadership being provided by the executive from April until the last week before the before Parliament is dissolved. Did the bill eventually leave the National Assembly to go to the Senate? And Senate was left with only 3 days to look into a very comprehensive set of amendments to the Constitution. So, incompetence by government. And in particular, I would attribute the blame on one, the Prime Minister. When you are the Prime Minister, you are the overseer of how the whole system works. You can't say, well, this is a reforms process and therefore stay aloof. You have to manage it through your Minister of Justice. Well aware of the timelines, isn't it? That was not, he didn't do that. Secondly, at Parliament, you have a gentleman called the Leader of the House, who happens to be the Deputy Prime Minister. As for him, he just didn't care a hoot. He was not there in Parliament, he was not there in government, he was busy campaigning. And therefore, once the bill had reached Parliament, the person who ought to be seeing through the processes in Parliament was missing in action. So, incompetence, lack of focus, just being unconcerned is what I would say, of the executive. Now, the second element, now this one is what one has seen once the bill had reached Parliament. There was a not so genuine interest in achieving the reforms by the political leadership in Parliament. Let me make an example. You know, the issue of reforms in this country are directly related to huge discretionary powers vested in the Prime Minister in appointments, and in particular related to the abuse by Prime Ministers of the security apparatus through the appointments that they make. But I can tell you that our politicians, and perhaps let me just say, in 1993, the Prime Minister would sit with a team of professionals in the security establishment to determine the appointments of the commander of the Lesotho Defense, the police commissioner, the director general of the national security, and others. So this was a process in the constitution where the Prime Minister would be properly advised by professional people as to the competence of who has to head any of those institutions. And then in 1996, the then BCP government removed all of that and vested the powers entirely on the Prime Minister acting on his own accord, unadvised by anybody. That was the beginning of the politicization. So if we want to sort out the problem, we have to say, where did we go wrong? Now I can tell you, the politicians in Parliament, in the executive, are not willing to ensure that that process of appointments is conducted in a professional manner. That is why I'm saying it does appear that they did not mean it when they said we want reforms. They are in a different world of their own as against what the nation desires. So, as a legal expert yourself, obviously this is one of the areas that you would have a keen interest in. Should the BAP come to power after the elections, what specific plans do you have to revive the process and make it truly a genuine process and people-centered, as it were? What steps are you going to take to ensure that happens? We will naturally retrieve the bills and ensure that we pilot them through the two houses of Parliament and finally through a referendum, because some of the clauses would require a referendum. Yeah. Okay. I'll take you back again to the issues that you've spoken to: social transformation, economic transformation, among others. What do these entail? What do this mean? Socio-economic transformation. In the main, it involves bringing our people into the work environment. In order to do that, you would have to grow the private sector. The weakness of this country is that over the years, the private sector has remained very stunted. And as a result, we have ended up with a joblessness situation in the country. Because over the years, governments have focused on ballooning the public sector. Everybody looks for a job in the public sector. And that has proven to be terribly unsustainable, especially as the tax base declines, as SACU remittances drop, and foreign aid has entered a fatigue phase. Because these are the main sources of revenue for the country. So we are in a crisis as a result. The consequence is a declining health sector, declining education sector, lack of services delivery to our people, and of course the crime situation that has grown on the wings of all of those challenges. So the BAP is going to concentrate on growing the private sector, putting a brake on the growth of the public sector in terms of employment, directing resources towards the growth of the private sector. We are going to recapitalize our health sector. Presently, there is 1 doctor to 8,000 patients. Our aim is that over a period we should have reduced that to 1 doctor to 4,000 patients. And then we are also talking about taking to Parliament a bill that has been lying fallow somewhere in government called the National Social Security Bill, which seeks to establish a fund that would be intervening to reach out to the indigent in our population. Now, when you talk about a job-based growth, you cannot do that without overhauling and reforming the entire education system. And so that is why the BAP talks about a curriculum from grade R that would necessarily incorporate developing skills in agriculture, technology, crafts. It also talks about expanding the TVET sector of education to all of the 10 districts of the country so that we produce more people with trades, artisans. And that is why we also talk about changing the landscape at higher education such that over a period of time, 60% of graduates in colleges and universities will be coming from areas such as agriculture, commerce, science, technology, engineering, medicine and health, and maths and computer studies. So we believe that a proper system of education would generate people with the skills that, one, are necessary for the present level of development in the country, but also skills that would create jobs rather than to be seeking for jobs. That is how we... the other element that we are, as BAP, quite concerned about is the disparity between urban and rural lives. In Lesotho, when you talk about poverty, it also has those elements, particularly rural poverty, because over the years we have neglected putting up the necessary infrastructure in the rural areas, such as roads, supply of electricity, water, reticulated water systems, clinics, schools. You still have in this country areas where pupils have to walk more than 10 kilometers to reach a school. And in many places you have schools that are in very terrible conditions, and sometimes pupils still study under the tree. So our approach is focus more on upgrading the countryside hinterland rather than focusing on urban upliftment areas.
Yes. You do speak to the issue of donor fatigue. You also speak to declining SACCO revenues and remittances as well, which is probably going to be a problem if South Africa does decide not to renew the special permit for a lot of our people who are in South Africa on that special permit. Now the issue is all these plans that you are talking about, then in view of the fact that you are speaking to declining revenues, whether from donor fatigue or from the usual sources, where will the money come from to fund all these socio-economic projects that you speak to?
You would have noticed that I said in the first 100 days, the one thing that you have to do is to institutionalize effective fiscal management discipline and reduce the expenditure. One element that I didn't mention is clamp down on corruption. I, of course, mentioned effective use of public assets. The money would come from there. It would come from there because there is a lot of savings that can be achieved if there is a proper management of the fiscus and the assets that the country does have. Apart from that, we believe that you can achieve some of these objectives through proper investment in the country. For example, you know that we get royalties from mining and from water sale to South Africa. With respect to water sale, a long time ago it was decided that that money was not going to go into the government budget. It would be reserved at the World Bank to be used for particularly infrastructure development. But over the time, government decided to put it in the consolidated fund, and then of course get consumed without actually doing what it was intended to do, which is development. So we'll go back to that plan. Put the royalties ring-fenced elsewhere to be used, particularly for rural development. That's the one part. The other part would be the royalties that we accrue from mining. A portion of that would be reserved to develop in the areas where we do the mining, so that you don't have this dual character of the economy there, where you taking out the riches from the community, but on the one hand the community is terribly poor in that particular area. So a portion of the royalties must go back to being invested in that area. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Turning to foreign policy issues under a BAP government, how will Lesotho's foreign policy look with respect to SADC, African Union countries and the rest of the world? That's number one. And then number two, given Lesotho's unique geographical position within South Africa, what would be the core elements of the relations with South Africa under a BAP government?
Let's start with our immediate neighbor, South Africa. Mm-hmm. Lesotho has a binational commission with South Africa. Mm-hmm. Up till now, it hasn't been used effectively because of a very poor foreign policy orientation of this country. Now, in our manifesto, we say we're going to use the binational commission to negotiate how the two countries must interact. One of the first things is free movement. In other words, non-use of passports for traveling across the international boundary between Lesotho and South Africa. That's the one thing. Two, we want to negotiate with South Africa a relationship that is akin to what Ireland has with the United Kingdom, whereby BASOTHO citizens would have exactly the same rights in South Africa as if they were South African citizens. That is what is called the EA option, that is Northern Ireland option, that Northern Ireland does have with the United Kingdom. That does not say that Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, but they have negotiated a special dispensation for Ireland citizens in the United Kingdom. The third element is you're aware that over 150 years, BASOTHO have been working to develop the mining industry in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And when many of those come home for retirement, many of them would have contracted all manner of disease, for which apparently monies have been reserved to be able to look after those people. But these poor miners, they came back home, and they don't have a government that negotiates on their behalf in order to have their benefits accrued to them in Lesotho. So many of them die very poor, and huge amounts of money are stashed in South Africa and not being accessed by these people. So it is going to be the responsibility of government to actually ensure that those funds are repatriated so that they can benefit those who are entitled to them. So that is the scope. Oh, the other element that I should mention with respect to South Africa, during the Mbeki government, the second government proposed what was called a Mohokare Corridor of Development, where South Africa would be investing in industries to be developed along the border, especially the western border with Lesotho, so that BASOTHO could have opportunities on the corridor, just like the Maputo-Witbank corridor of development. We would be interested in reviving that project. So that's our policy on South Africa. With respect to SADC and the AU, our foreign policy would be one of commitment to the general outlook of SADC and the African Union. Remember that we messed ourselves as government recently with the Morocco Sahrawi Republic saga, and that has tarnished the reputation of Lesotho within SADC and within the AU. Such things should not happen. So we have a responsibility to restore the integrity of our foreign policy in those two forums. Yeah.
Okay. With South Africa, to bring you back to South Africa, we've seen the rampaging farmer gangs. We've seen the export of crime to South Africa and from South Africa to Lesotho. It works both ways, really. What do you have to say? We have seen some of the major political parties, particularly the All BASOTHO convention. They've been openly fraternizing with those farmer gangs, some of whom are suspected criminals in South Africa. What would your policy be towards these farmer gangs, and what is your take in terms of the criminality that is happening between the two countries?
Two parties must take a responsibility over what is happening. The ABC and the DC, they are the ones who fraternize with farmer gangs, and so we leave it to them to manage. But as far as we are concerned, that forms part of managing down crime in this country. This country is awash with illegal firearms, which is why we have this very high homicide rate. South Africa, elements within South Africa seem to also be supplying farm gangs with weapons, as much as you are aware of high caliber firearms that have disappeared from the Lesotho police armories. Apparently also some may have disappeared from the LDF armory. So South Africa and Lesotho have to sit together and develop a comprehensive strategy of disarming and pacifying society as a way of containing what may well be developing into a regional terrorism. But political parties that you have mentioned have to take a lead in ensuring that, look, farmer is a cultural genre. How it transited to crime, how it transited to politics, baffles me. But it happens that it has. And so a lot of restoration to what is normal has to be carried out by all of us who may be responsible one way or the other.
Finally from me, in the debates that just occurred this week and last week, you have spoken to the issue of parastatals or state enterprises. What would be the thrust of the BAP government with regards to those? What exactly do you intend to do with them? Some of them are non-performing, and some of them have never been heard of for a long time, that people even think they don't exist.
Three things. One, review the continued relevance of their mandate. Secondly, make those that remain accountable and professionalize them, because you know that they have been infiltrated by politics and taken over for many years. And thirdly, reposition those that you think can still be useful, provided their mandates have been redefined.
No, thank you very much.
Maybe to take it back a bit, if I'm not mistaken, you said you see the BAP becoming one of the four main parties.
Yes.
What is your exact prediction? Where do you see yourselves? As the major party in government, when you came in, you had 10 MPs. There have been some reconfigurations with the coming in of the RFP and so forth. How many do you see yourselves getting?
I'm not going to give you a number because I haven't consulted my witch doctor. But I'm very optimistic that we will do well. Mm-hmm. We probably will surprise many people.
Okay.
BAP is certainly a major player in Lesotho politics from now on going forward. So look to the outcome around the 9th and 10th of October. It will confirm what I've just said.
And some parties are already angling and courting each other for coalition partnerships. Has there been anything like that in your scope? Are you do you have parties that you say these are people that we can work with, or will never work with these people?
We have taken a deliberate decision to just focus on the elections. Mm-hmm. and deal with questions of who to jump into bed with after the elections. And when a call is made in that respect, we will look into which party approximates our core beliefs. But remember that whether we go into government, that will naturally be determined also by the numbers game.
Okay. And possibly lastly, the BAP has expressed concerns before regarding the way the IEC has been handling the voters' roll. Do you still have such concerns right now? Are you confident that the IEC is on top of the game?
So maybe to contribute to that, we've seen videos circulating, and some of the parties as well that we have spoken to, they are quite unhappy with the voters' roll. They speak about issues around the duplication of the voters' roll, and maybe the fact that political parties are also not allowed to, they don't even have the names of people who are involved in the early voting, and they are not even allowed to monitor those, and they feel that some of these issues might actually affect the credibility of the elections. As he was asking, are you satisfied with the work of the IEC in terms of its preparations for the elections?
Far from it. First of all, these elections happen in the context of a very unusual environment. And then there is the IEC, which is far less prepared than at any other time in recent years.
What is the unusual environment, maybe?
Those are the most hard-fought, unpredictable elections. Far too many parties in the game. The environment has also been affected by the extraordinary lengths to which other parties have decided to make democracy a money-driven business, such that you don't quite know whether these elections will be testing what the electorate wants or what money wants. It's very unusual by a sort of standard. And therefore makes it terribly unpredictable. And then in terms of the organization of the elections, the IEC is terribly ill-prepared. Those things that you are mentioning have to come to mind. But also the IEC unusually underfunded in this election. So you have an unusual environment, an unusual poor level of preparation. We are quite worried as the BAP that these elections might end up being very controversial as a result. And we just hope and pray. You know, yesterday we hosted a prayer meeting just to pray that the elections should be run properly. You know, so we just pray that all of these elements that throw in a lot of confusion should not result in post-election controversies.
Perhaps final word to the electorate, to BASOTHO. What have you got to say as a final word to BASOTHO as we head into the elections?
Simple. There are two parties in these elections. It is the others that they know about, which hold nothing for this country and their lives, and the BAP on the other side, which has a very clear program of transformation. And therefore our call to them is for them to do the right thing and choose the BAP. They will see on the ballot paper a cattle-drawn plow. Let them just make a tick in the box next to it.
Thank you very much, Professor Mahao, for your time.